Hi, Ed, and hi, Tim. Like one of my rare episodes with two guests. I do it rarely, but I always love it because then there's like three people talking about Bitcoin. It's always better than, than just two people. Tim was already on the podcast, so maybe let's jump directly to Ed. Maybe give us some background of like who you are and especially why you're excited about Bitcoin.
Yeah, sure. My everybody always wants to know about your Bitcoin background story, but it's weird. It's like you go to the dentist, nobody ever says like, "Hey, tell me your background as a dentist." But everybody needs to know your Bitcoin background story. I've always been an early adopter. I saw an article on Gawker about this internet money. Bought this Bitcoin and didn't know what to make of it. Bought it at $6. A year later, I needed some money. I went back and looked. It was still $6, and I sold it. Never knew that it went to 37 in between. A year and a half later, somebody said, "What's this Bitcoin thing?" I'm like, "It's like internet money, $6." Went and checked the price. It was 1,000. I had a heart attack and went back to where I bought it, saying maybe I still have it. And I went to Mount Gox, and of course, Mount Gox was gone. So the old story is, should I be glad I got my original money back or sad I didn't self custody? But in any case, at that point, I kind of started buying massively and crazily. About 2015, 16 is when I just went all in, and no mortgage, no retirement accounts in Bitcoin, everything. And about 2019, I did a couple entrepreneurial things that all failed. And my wife said, "You got to get a real job." Found a job with the Bitcoin conference, and then was fortunate to go work on a sidechain L2 project with Mara. And then Strategy called and wanted help with their conference, and I was lucky to go work for them for a while. But things are happening so quickly in this treasury space that some bigger opportunities came along. And I'm working with the first Bitcoin treasury company out of Mexico called Arcadia B, and also with Tim on Bitcoin Treasuries media/events/advisory.
I love that. Really, really cool. And the treasury, I really want to dive deep today into treasury companies. But before, for the few people that haven't caught the first episode with me and Tim, maybe Tim, give us some background of who you are and especially why you're excited about Bitcoin.
Sure. Yeah, I was introduced to Bitcoin in January of 2021 and spent several years just reposting every Bitcoin post on Twitter at the time that I thought was interesting. And through a series of events, started the Bitcoin Treasuries podcast just shy of a year ago through some relationships that, again, mostly through X, meeting people, and had the opportunity to interview Ryan and Jeff and some of the guys that kind of became the MSTR True North sort of podcast and group really covering MicroStrategy. So through the podcast and then the digital conference, now we're putting on a in-person conference next week in New York, and super excited to have lots of the executives and service providers and investors all in one place.
Yeah, the space, the treasury space, like really evolved. I first, when I heard about strategy in 2020, I thought this whole thing will go way faster than it went. And now it seems like now it really got traction in 2024, 2025. How do you look at the treasury company space in general right now?
It's an unlock, right? Throughout the history of Bitcoin, there was, like, when I bought my first Bitcoin, I think I put my credit card into some Japanese website, and then they said, "Yeah, you have Bitcoin," but who knows what I really had. We found out that it wasn't real Bitcoin or whatever. Then Coinbase came along, and then you had mining companies, and then you had all these different unlocks to allow people to get access to Bitcoin. And so what Saylor really did is he figured out this way to not only allow corporations to hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet, but then start to unlock fixed income markets and equity markets, and really allow some of that investor base and debt markets that can't get access to Bitcoin to now have access to it. And so that's really where I kind of summarized what the treasury companies are doing, is they're unlocking a whole new market for Bitcoin. With, of course, strategy being, I don't even want to use the phrase in the lead, because they're so far beyond in the lead. but they're doing things years ahead of everybody else, and then everybody else is going to try to figure out how to get to that level that they're at. Are we going to get to the point where some Fortune 100 company is going to drop 10 or $100 billion on Bitcoin? Sure makes sense. You look down the Fortune 100 and how much cash they have on the books, and it's a melting ice cube. It's just their treasury is disappearing. So it doesn't make a lot of sense that they would keep sitting on all that cash and T-bills. But the career risk for the executives, the boards, the vanguards that are telling them not to do it, it's just going to take time. But those unlocks just keep coming and coming and coming for Bitcoin. ETFs, massive unlock. You don't see these unlocks going away either. Even when people say, "Oh, well, it was banned in China," no, it wasn't. They just turned off the on and off ramps for a while, and then people found a way around them. So, in summary, that's kind of where I feel this whole treasury market is. It just provided this huge unlock, and at the Bitcoin for Corporation conference put on by Strategy in May, Fong Li, the CEO, said there will be 700 publicly traded companies with Bitcoin on the balance sheet by the end of the year. And even internally, we're like, what is he talking about? What is he going out on the limb with that number? And then about an hour later, we all looked at each other and said, you know what? He's right. It's going to be 700, and we're on track a little bit for that to get to that many public companies. And then on top of that, 10x that for the number of private companies. So it's happening.
It's super interesting when I look at treasury companies, because I mean, first of all, maybe it's maybe we should define it, because I think there's like two different kind of treasury companies. There's companies that just have profit and put their profits into into Bitcoin, and then there are treasury companies that on top of that, like a strategy, provide kind of capital unlocking. How do you look at that, where we have more and more treasury companies that don't only put it on the treasury, but also like trying to service that unlock capital? And what I'm also like kind of wondering, how much space is there? Like I'm like, how many of those treasury companies that basically mostly do that do we need like a strategy, as you said? Like, it's not a lead, it's like they're in a whole nother level and a whole nother sphere, as they're so far ahead. How much of that do we need versus the treasury companies that just like put Bitcoin in their balance sheet?
Yeah, I'll just make a quick comment, and then I'll let Tim dive into this. But I mean, how many T-bill treasury companies do we need? Right? How many? If Saylor had said we're going to be a diamond treasury company, then everybody has to learn about diamonds. It's just a new pristine asset that companies can use to protect their wealth, and it's something that Tim and I are now thinking about all the time. Is like, what is a Bitcoin treasury company? Does that mean they have to be all in, or can they just have a little? And what is a Bitcoin company? Nobody has those answers yet. But Tim, why don't you add on to that?
Yeah, to your point, Robin, it's if you just have Bitcoin on your balance sheet, but you're not really engaging the capital markets, then maybe that's one bucket, and you can give it a name like you have Bitcoin on your balance sheet. But when I think of a Bitcoin treasury company, there's probably only a few dozen right now. Companies like Strategy, like MetaPlanet, like Smarter Web Company, that are engaging the capital markets and using these terms like Bitcoin per share, Bitcoin yield, and are out in front of the media, both traditional and social media, to engage with the retail investors in particular. Very, very visible, very transparent, and updating, if not daily, usually weekly, instead of just the regular TradFi quarterly reports and quarterly earnings calls that come out. So yeah, to Ed's comment about what is a Bitcoin company, that conjures up in my mind, a service or a product that, like an exchange, right? Maybe that's a Bitcoin company, but I'll be intrigued along with everyone else to see, is there a Bitcoin based like financial services or products and services along with Bitcoin yield that can be a growth company, right? Whether it's like growth or, even hyper growth, along with engaging the capital markets. I don't think we've really seen that yet. And so I think 6, 12 months from now, or maybe even 6 or 12 weeks from now, we could start seeing these Bitcoin treasury companies doing things that maybe we haven't seen before. So I think very nascent and, you know, just at the beginning of all of this. And it is interesting that it took 3, 4 years to have a fast follower or a slow follower of MicroStrategy. But now it seems that, you have these groups that are, have said publicly they're going to every capital market in the world to launch these things. And so here we go.
Yeah, it can be like the tide coming in. When you're sitting there at the beach, you don't notice each individual wave adding to the tide coming in, but then all of a sudden the water's up on your towel, and then the water's up on the rocks, and it's just like, whoa, when did this happen? And that's kind of what's happening in this space. I mean, my feed is kind of telling me now that people are worried about there being too many treasury companies, and once they all have all this Bitcoin, what are they going to do with it? And I'm like, okay, that's the next part of the wave that comes in that people are going to discuss. And uh, in the Bitcoin world, there's words that just appear all of a sudden, like ordinals. You go back and look at ordinals 3 years ago, it wasn't even a word, and then now it's ingrained in the Bitcoin lore. So this whole treasury thing it's early, but at the same time, it's quickly evolving, and the waves are coming in.
Yeah, and I think it's a very natural progression. I just talked about that in the last podcast, where when you thought about the Bitcoin game theory in 2000, let's say 11, you would have thought about companies at some point buying it, and the same people are now complaining, "Oh, why are companies buying?" So, like, I don't get that argument at all.
Yeah, no, and that's a point I try to make a lot, is that they say, oh, well, these two are competing. I'm like, when the pizza is growing as fast as the pizza is growing, everybody's pizza gets bigger. And I don't call that competition, right? Competition is where you have a scarce resource. It's the market for shoes. And it's like Nike and Adidas are competing, but the Bitcoin pizza is growing so fast, we're all winning. And so it's not really competition.
Yeah, and it's almost like when like if there's a new company added to the Bitcoin treasury, this is a company that will actually work for all of the Bitcoin hodlers. So because basically they are giving their financial energy and the financial energy from their customers and from the whole ecosystem towards Bitcoin. Like that's I would be more concerned if there's no Bitcoin treasury company. Like if there's non-Bitcoin treasury companies in 2025, I think that would be a red flag for Bitcoin after 16 years. How do you look at?
As an early holder of Bitcoin, that's what makes you most upset, is when you got in early, you've built this stack, and then somebody just comes in with their $100 million and buys more than you have, and you're like, God damn it. Okay, it's good for all of us, but at the same time, I was supposed to get ahead of that guy. What happened? Anyways.
Yeah, maybe that's where some of the envy comes from. Where like, oh, like Sailor only started in 2020, and now he has like with strategy and also personal like over 600,000 Bitcoin. And I remember talking just like 1.5 or almost 2 years ago, where it was a question: will he get to 1% of the supply? And now it's like 3 times that.
No, with no end in sight. The higher the price goes, the more they can buy, which is you look at the spreadsheets, you look at the math, and it's like the, the debt markets will loan them more and more and more as the price goes up. It's not going to get to the point where they're buying 1 Bitcoin per week. I mean, it'll just keep accelerating. It's pretty insane.
And it's interesting. I mean, Tim, you covered that probably like so much also with all the media things and podcasts that you're doing. Is there like, do you foresee where those treasury companies kind of end up in a Bitcoin world? Because if I think about even someone that is privately having like 10 Bitcoin, 100 Bitcoin right now, at some point, this will be such a big amount that he can actually play as a small local bank. And if someone with 100 Bitcoin can play a small local bank, like it's interesting. It is a very interesting thought experiment. Like what can strategy with, let's say, 700, 800,000 Bitcoin do in a Bitcoin world? That's just like such an interesting, like, where do we end up and what role will those treasury companies actually play when they maybe are even service providers in the financial space?
Yeah. I mean, it's the age old question of what can you do when you have the money? And it's like, well, I guess whatever you want, right? But that's, I think, the thing that a lot of individuals, a lot of these institutions, corporates in New York specifically, like they're just not getting yet, is that these Bitcoin treasury companies have the money. They already have the money. It's not like they have some okay asset that they can maybe borrow against. Like they have the most pristine collateral. So I think when some of those bells go off and people start to get it, you'll see quite a few things change, including the PE multiple or MNAV or whatever you want to calculate. It might just mirror what some of the companies in the S&P trade at, which is a lot more than 1 or 2 or 4x book value. So what will they do? I mean, many conversations swirling around about, to your point, banking, insurance products, any sort of, um, you know, like you're the bank. You can do any sort of banking, insurance product, reinsurance product. I mean, the things that really move the big blocks around, I guess, just shy of being a nation state.
You're not thinking big enough. A small local bank. How about a privately held central bank? Put that into ChatGPT, and it goes crazy, man. A privately held central bank is probably where we're going.
So that the strategy one is so big that it almost acts as a centrally, like a central bank for like a large portion of people.
Yeah,
Crazy to think about that.
No, it is. It breaks. That's. I can't speak for Saylor, but I know that he is thinking way ahead on this, and he uses ChatGPT to think way ahead on this, and we're going to a place that's going to really break a lot of brains on Wall Street. Their incentive systems are all tied around this old fiat system and how they can make money on it, but Bitcoin breaks it all, and so we're continually getting to these new thought processes that are going to make us wonder, why did we structure it that way for so long?
I had and I waited for that question for someone to speak about that has no more clue about that than me, and I think you both are great for that. Someone came up to me and asked like, oh, if the government really wants to accumulate Bitcoin and they have right now, like, let's say 0 Bitcoin, like, USA like has what 20,000, like not a lot of Bitcoin, as they got to know that they have less than they actually thought they have, and now they have strategy in the jurisdiction of saying like, oh, we could acquire like similar to maybe what they did with the 10% of Intel, what Trump did. Like, I don't know the full story of that. Is there any chance that at some point strategy is just such a big company that they almost have to be nationalized, or like some sort of like bigger corporation collaboration with the USA?
I'm not touching that one with a 10-foot pole. To you, Tim.
I think it's an interesting question. I think it's a timely question. My thought is no. I think you can have these private or publicly traded companies, and you can also have sovereigns buying Bitcoin, however they choose to do that, whether it's through private sales, OTC desks, spot Bitcoin. And I think part of this puzzle that might need to be put together is, on one hand, you have Bitcoin, which is such a scarce asset with a cap, 21 million. That's all there's ever going to be. On the other hand, you have fiat, which is can only be issued through the central banks, but it's unlimited. And so, the point being, I don't think the governments should be or are concerned about driving up the price of Bitcoin. If the United States buys Bitcoin at any price before the other countries do, then the United States wins compared to the other countries. It doesn't matter if Bitcoin's at $1 million or $10 million a coin. It's that game theory. So that's my thought there.
Yeah, we've got kind of a broken thought process. When everybody was having these 100,000 parties, and I was like, wait, 100,000 in what, pesos or yen, or it's like, oh no, dollars. I'm like, yeah, because you live in the U.S. and the euro is so close to the dollar. It's like, okay, then 100,000, but it's just a random number. And as Tim just said, like the government driving up the price of Bitcoin. That's not what they do. What the government does is they drive down the value of their fiat. And so it's just so much easier to talk about this stuff with someone from Argentina, someone from Venezuela, someone from Zimbabwe, someone from any one of the 200 countries that are on the bottom of the list. They get it in 1 second, because they already have their wealth in dollars somewhere. They go, I don't trust my local currency. I have it in dollars. I'm like, okay, so let's take one more step. What would you do if you wanted to be better than dollars? And they're like, but dollars are just fine. I'm like, okay, that's a valid argument until they're not. And we don't know when that's going to be, and we don't know how fast this money printer is going to go. But you got to kind of get yourself out of this mindset of the dollar being the end all currency or wealth metric. It's just a denominator in the Bitcoin equation.
Is there a chance that Bitcoin will be that end all wealth denominator where people will say what is, how many Bitcoin does the company has, and how many Bitcoin do you have, that's the denominator?
It's either that or Fartcoin, one of the two. Yeah, I mean, it's not no, but does Bitcoin become the denominator? I mean, it's I'm gonna get it backwards. Is 21 over infinity? Yeah, 21 million over infinity. The guy from Sweden that wrote the book. It just changes all the formulas. It changes all the denominators. I just had another neighbor last night that he was like, well, how do I know that somebody's not going to change the code to be more than 21 million? And they just go, just because, leave me alone. It's like it's code, and if you don't want to learn it, you don't have to learn it. I'm to that point where I've been in it so long. I just get tired of explaining it. But that whole concept that there only being 21 million is the hardest part for people to get their head around when they don't want to. And then once they do, then they're all in. It's just that barrier of saying, I don't get this. How could there only be 21 million?
Yeah, because we never had that. It's such a concept that we never experienced, that there's something digital, global, and fully capped with 21 million. That everyone has a reason to buy. Also, that's something completely new. Maybe also because we've talked a bit 1 or 2 times already about Bitcoin yield and Bitcoin per share, just to make sure that the audience also knows what this is. Maybe you can, Tim or Ed, whoever wants to take it, explain what is a Bitcoin yield and Bitcoin per share, and especially why do they matter?
Go ahead, Tim.
So Bitcoin per share, as a metric, you want it to be increasing. So if the corporation is buying more Bitcoin, then the Bitcoin per share, if it's accretive to the shareholder, should be going up. It should be increasing. And Bitcoin yield is an expression of how much the Bitcoin per share is going up over a certain amount of time, usually year over year. Year to date.
Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast, and if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here or here. Oh, maybe also here.